What is Nowruz?
Well, Nowruz means in Persian new day, and this is the first day of Persian New Year, and it's a national celebration. It's a wonderful day of celebrating life and actually rejuvenating of life on earth.
How old is Nowruz?
Nowruz is as old as, I can say, after the Ice Age. And that means because Nowruz is the celebration of rejuvenation of life, coming of life back to earth, that must have been celebrated that time, from the time that humans started getting out of caves and started these new villages, agricultural villages. And once you deal with agriculture in the northern hemisphere, spring is the time that the snow melts and grains start sprouting and life just comes back to earth. And in that sense, it's extremely old. But in the sense of Nowruz that we celebrate now, it probably started with Iranian tribes in Central Asia before even they had come to the Iranian plateau, which is now Iran.
Where did Nowruz develop as a major celebration?
Nowruz, the roots of Nowruz that we celebrate now, you can find in Central Asia, among the Iranian tribes before they migrated into Iranian plateau, which is now the country of Iran. In that region, they still did not have the kind of calendar, this very specific calendar that we have. We have all the dates and we know exactly where they occur. They went with seasons, and there were two major seasons, spring and fall. Spring, of course, was rejuvenation of nature, and fall was the celebration of harvesting. So these two major celebrations developed among the Iranians, and then when they came down to the Iranian plateau, these two celebrations underwent some evolution and turned to what we have now as Nowruz. Well, the Gregorian calendar only helped with the Islamic calendar, which was lunar and changed in the course of years and could not be set in the spring. The spring equinox was based on the calculation of the Babylonian astronomers in about 600 or 500 BC.
Do we have any archaeological evidence for Nowruz?
There is absolutely no archaeological evidence for Nowruz, but we have literally evidence for Nowruz and historical evidence for Nowruz. You have to bear in mind that Nowruz is a kind of ritual that has to do with people's cleaning, eating, meeting one another, and taking care of each other. None of these things really leave any archaeological evidence, material evidence behind. Therefore, we cannot even expect to have any archaeological evidence for Nowruz. So in that sense, no, we don't have any archaeological evidence for Nowruz, only literally and historical.
Did the Persian Achaemenids celebrate Nowruz?
We must assume that. But if you look in the records of Persian Achaemenid period, you have absolutely no records in either the written records or iconography of Persepolis or other places that Achaemenid built. Therefore, there are some Greek historians who actually talk about Nowruz being celebrated by the Achaemenids. But these authors are after Alexander. Therefore, they are not contemporary with the Achaemenids. But we need to actually accept their narrative because, as I said, Nowruz is such an old tradition that even though it may not have been celebrated by the Achaemenids as the New Year or Nowruz, but it certainly was among one of the major celebrations in that period.
Was Persepolis the center for Nowruz celebration?
In terms of archaeology and history, we do not know that. It may have been. And I assume it should have been because this is a major place and it was in the heart of the Achaemenid Empire. And we expect that major celebrations would occur at Persepolis. But neither the Achaemenids themselves nor other contemporary sources would talk about this celebration at Persepolis or at Susa or in Babylon or in Hekmatane or Ekbatan. But we need to really assume that this was going on there, even though we don't have any hard evidence for that.
What is the oldest evidence for Nowruz celebration in Iran?
Well, the oldest evidence comes from 2nd century AD during the Sasanian Empire. And that is the most solid evidence of Nowruz we have in Iran. But of course, that doesn't mean it wasn't celebrated before. This is the first and most solid evidence we have of Nowruz during the 2nd century AD in the Sasanian Empire.
Do we know how widespread the Nowruz celebration was in the ancient world?
I mentioned that Nowruz celebration is also spring and rejuvenation. That means most nations in the northern hemisphere actually celebrated that. And not necessarily as Nowruz or in Farvardin, but they celebrated all over the northern hemisphere. In the Middle East or ancient Near East, the first nation who actually celebrated something close to Nowruz was the Sumerians. And they actually, it was a very religious celebration. It was because of the resurrection of the god Dumuzi, who lived underground, and every spring he was revived and came to earth and brought fertility and fecundity to earth. Now that major celebration in Mesopotamia by the Sumerians continued with the Akkadians, Old Babylonians, and Assyrians. In Central Asia, it was celebrated by the Iranian and Indo-Iranian tribes and people. So it was widespread all over.
How many nations celebrate Nowruz?
Well, Nowruz is celebrated today by many nations, from the Balkans all the way to China. And because of that, no nation actually celebrates Nowruz and the rituals that are connected with that, like Charshanbe Suri, which is jumping over bonfire, and Hafsin, which is a major component of Nowruz celebration, and that is a tablecloth, or on a table people put a number of items, edible and non-edible items, that actually represent fertility and fecundity. But this kind of ritual changes from region to region. For example, Charshanbe Suri in Azerbaijan, not Iranian Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan in the old Soviet Azerbaijan, they actually celebrate Charshanbe Suri on the eve of the Nowruz. Whereas in Iran and in Afghanistan, they celebrate it on the last Wednesday of the year. Now, we don't know how old Charshambe Suri or Hafsin were. But we can imagine that because one has to do with fire and the importance of fire, and the other one has symbolic importance for fertility and fecundity, they must be old too. But again, like Nowruz, we don't exactly know how old they are. They definitely are at least pre-Islamic, definitely Sassanian. But prior to that, we don't know. As for Hafsin, this is also very different from region to region. For example, the Parsi of India, they call it Hafchin. That means ordering 7 things. And in Iran, Hafsin, actually, some people think it was Hafshin. And that is, there were 7 items that their names started with the letter Shin, and later on it became letter S. We don't really know about these things, how they developed. And nowadays in Afghanistan, they actually don't even call it Hafsin, they call it Hafmive. And what they do is they put 7 dried fruits and their juices on the table that goes with the Hafsin ritual.
Was Nowruz originally a religious holiday?
Every holiday that people celebrate in the world would have religious roots to that. Let me give you an example, then we can go back to Nowruz. Thanksgiving Day. Nobody thinks of Thanksgiving today as a religious holiday. People get together, it's a family holiday, and you don't see any religious ritual in it. But Thanksgiving was basically, in the beginning, was giving thanks to God for the fertility and fecundity and the food that the early American immigrants had on the table. So, and then in the course of time, it lost its religious overtone. Same thing with Nowruz. Nowruz, of course, was a religious holiday. After all, it's in Farvardin. That is the month of the ghosts. The dead would come and visit the living. And it was also, in Iran, it had religious connotation, even all the way to the end of the Sassanian dynasty. And then when, after the invasion of Islam, then, of course, there was a lot of persecution of people who celebrated their own national holidays, which was partly a religious ceremony. And because of that pressure, in the course of time, it developed into a secular celebration of the first day of the spring.
Is there any ritual or symbolic connection between Nowruz and other events such as Christmas, Passover, or St. Patrick's Day?
Not necessarily Passover, although some scholars do link them together. But with Purim, it has a very close connection. And Purim is always in the spring, and it's a celebration of happiness and freedom and fertility. Therefore, it has something to do with that. But Christmas has nothing to do with Nowruz. Christmas has to do with the birthday of Mithra. And that was on the winter solstice. And that is when Mithra was born. Mithra is an Iranian god of covenant and light. And on that day, the days start getting longer and longer until the first day of spring when the day and night became equal. Now, and that is actually another celebration for the victory of light over darkness. Now, the Christians, because they were so influenced by Mithraism and birthday of Mithra because of the Roman soldiers who took that from the East and Middle East to Europe, they celebrated actually Christmas on the 21st of December. And St. Augustine, in his Confessions, actually laments that good Christians go on top of the roof and bow to the sun on that day. And because the 2 days actually coincided and they didn't want to have this pagan day as the birthday of Christ, they moved it a few days ahead of that. And that is the connection with Mithraism, not with Nowruz.
UNESCO has registered Nowruz as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. What do you think of that?
Yes, this was on October 2nd, 2009 in Abu Dhabi, I think. This is a wonderful recognition because it is called intangible because of the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, that this kind of celebration hardly leaves any solid evidence or material behind. So it's a relationship, it's a rejuvenation that you celebrate. And when UNESCO made it official, it was extremely important for all those nations who actually identify their nationality and their past with this very important celebration. And that made it official, especially for the Kurds, who in Turkey, until very recently, were not allowed to celebrate their most cherished celebration, which was Nowruz. And after that, they now celebrate it freely everywhere.